over the past few years, the domestic economy in Australia has had pullback.
It's for the people chasing more affordable properties. That's kind of where these sort of pockets sit.
You can feel richness just pouring out.
But it's still a fairly big standalone economy.
Reinvestment by government sector items can often mean that the domestic economy is a little bit weaker.
I would probably be cautious of these areas.
The third Melbourne satellite city that is going to do very well over the next few years. We've been doing a little mini series here going through Geelong, going through Bendigo, and in this episode we're going to go through Ballarat, the old gold capital of Australia. I think that's what it's referred as. Adi, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited about this. Another place with the word rat in it. I just don't understand why we have to keep doing these, but here we are.
Ararat is so much worse than Ballarat.
That's true. It almost has two rats in that.
Did we go through this on publicly? Adi has a phobia of rats. He's very, very afraid of them. So he talks a lot.
If this is in the YouTube headline, if this is the buyer's agent scared of rats, if that's the title, I'm quitting.
Data buyer's agent refuses to look at the data because of rats. Rat. But you did say Ararat out of nowhere. You could have named 14,000 other suburbs and you chose Ararat. And now we're talking about Ballarat, a region that has a lot going for it as well. Definitely worth unpacking, unveiling, going into a little bit of detail. And as we go through this episode, we're going to go through the fundamentals, the economy, the infrastructure there, whether we like it or not, why. And we're going to go through some suburbs, Adi?
We are.
Yeah. Yes, we're going to go through some suburbs.
I don't know why we do all the preamble, to be honest, because people are going to skip forward to be like suburbs. The suburbs.
Let's just give it to them. Let's just give it to them.
All right.
Yeah, I want to see.
My main one. So we've done this as a series and we've done Ballarat at the end for a reason. If I had to rank, it would be Bendigo, it would be Geelong, and then it would be Ballarat. So Ballarat actually doesn't have a lot of suburbs that I can see that are going to perform particularly well over the next little while because there's a bit more supply going on. The economic activity is probably not as vibrant there. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of the other two. This one is sort of like, it's there, but So there's only a couple of suburbs that I'll mention.
So can I?
Yeah, of course.
Actually, say the suburbs. Like we're about to do the same thing again. Like you get the suburbs later, everyone. You're gonna get it. You can get it. Later.
See you in 20 minutes. Mount Clear, I'm a fan of. I'm seeing really good on the ground signs for Mount Clear, and I think Wenduri was another one that we had discussed previously.
Yeah, that was
which
good.
Is one of the regional markets.
Yep.
So
you like that one?
I do. It's affordable. It has good rental yield. There's great opportunities for renovation, sort of value add sort of properties. They are older. It's slightly lower socioeconomic, but if you don't care about that, because as I said, it doesn't have an impact on price growth. Not bad options.
Half the suburbs we pick are like really, really like.
Holes. Yeah, we're not doing Rose Bay here, guys. We're not doing Brooklyn.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Holes.
You can trust the YouTube comments being like, but that area sucks. That's the common YouTube comment that we get, or a comment that we.
And I say you suck. No, I don't say that. I don't say that.
Do I respond like that? I don't respond like that. I'm always like, why? Tell me more. I want to know.
That's right.
Curiosity.
Tell us about your very subjective views on a particular suburb because you read a news article from 10 years ago that said someone got robbed. That is the reason there's no capital growth.
That's true. If it means anything, a lot of our stuff is, and this should be reiterated, I do it all the time, it is our opinion. This isn't financial or
no, of course not.
Other forms of advice. It is our opinion. It is subjective in its nature. We are backing it up with a whole range of reasons why.
Correct.
But it is subjective. So Adi's subjective opinion is Ballarat.
Unnecessary.
is the third best of the three satellite cities that we're talking about. But if you're from there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not an area to invest in. Is that a fair summary?
Correct. No, absolutely. You can still park your money there. It still has some good drivers in certain pockets.
Do you get more yield at least?
You can, yeah. Wenduri, I would say if you're not getting somewhere 5.5% yield, you're potentially not looking at the right areas. So absolutely you can. I've got nothing against any areas. I'm a data person. I just look at the numbers and I'll be like, the numbers look good. And And I was like, hey, Reedham, can we do another podcast on the numbers for this particular area? And you're usually like,
no.
How did you get into my house? You know, so
get out now.
Please, it's 2 a.m. Leave me alone.
Let's go. What do we got? Tell me a little bit about Ballarat. I don't know much.
Yep.
I didn't go there. Now that I think of it, I planned my trip to Ballarat. It was part of our day trips, but it rained, so we didn't go to Ballarat.
Gotcha.
But we made sure we went to Geelong and Bendigo, partly because I had also picked up that it was the areas to invest in. I'm like, Ballarat, there's 2 other ones. Let's go to the other ones. Yes.
So let's set the framework for Ballarat. So we started with Geelong, 270,000 population. We went to Bendigo, 130,000. So Ballarat is probably the smallest of the 3, I would say. Mm-hmm. It's sitting at 120,000. It is growing at a similar rate to Geelong, though, 2.5% over the last 12 months. Yeah, the population growth, which is really cool. Unemployment rate, even healthier, 4.3%. So now we're getting closer to, I guess, national averages. Would that be right? Yep. And what's
Bendigo's below the national average. The national average is 4.1 at the moment.
Yep. And 4.3, where does that sort of sit in your
very good
Reedham framework?
I love regional areas with unemployment trends in and around there. You'd have to trend analysis this and look at employment growth. Again, we've done a couple YouTube videos specifically on this. When you're unpacking how employment impacts a certain location, you want to look a little bit more than the unemployment rate itself. Unemployment rates in regional areas could be higher for a number of reasons. You want to look at trend, see where it sits at relative to its 10-year average. Yep. You also want to track things like participation rates, and you want to like how many people are going there actively looking for work. Just because you're not seeking, what do you call it? Well, job seeker payments. It doesn't mean that like there's a lot of people who want to work that are not on job seeker payments, but the unemployment rate is only measuring the people on the job seeker payments.
Gotcha.
So the holistic employment metrics need to be taken into account rather than just
point in time percentage.
Exactly, rather than just a percentage point. But broadly, all 3 of these areas have decent, strong economies driving them and diversified economies too, even though Ballarat is the gold city.
It is, and so was Bendigo, right? Like you said. So the GRP, so gross regional product, 8 billion. So it's not small, it's not huge, not quite the 20 billion that Geelong is, but it's still a fairly big standalone economy, which I really love. Makes up 1.5% of the Victorian GDP, which is pretty cool. Economic highlights. So there have been a lot of investments into education, biodiversity. It has I guess you didn't end up going there, and I know we talked about Bendigo having like a bit of a heritage vibe to it.
Yep.
Dissimilar to Geelong. Geelong just seemed like more of it's like a vibey city, right?
Yeah, it's nice.
Ballarat's got a very similar vibe to Bendigo. So it is a bit more heritagey.
The gold cities, yeah.
Exactly.
You know how much money was floating around? These places, you can feel it as you're just walking past. Is like, you walk past, be like, whoa, it's loaded. Yeah. This place used to be loaded. I went to Russia about 6 years ago now for the Soccer World Cup there. And when you go past it, being like, whoa, these people were like,
wealthy.
What did you call them? Tsars and like wealthy.
Oligarchs, man.
Wealthy. It was just, you can feel richness just pouring out. You can feel that in Bendigo. You can feel that in Ballarat. I can't speak so much for Ballarat on the ground because I haven't been there for a long time. But definitely Bendigo and these gold cities, because gold made up a much larger function of our economy. 150 years ago, it was powerhouse.
And these
region.
were the epicenters of that sort of gold rush.
Ballarat Ballarat was, and Bendigo, and Australia's. It made up a bigger function of the world economy then. Gold was a much, much bigger function. Now it's obviously much smaller as the economies have changed around the world. But nonetheless, Ballarat has transitioned completely away from that. It does export gold to the world, of course. It's got a gold economy too, but it's fully diversified, and that's very clear in the data and the composition of the Ballarat economy, much like Bendigo, when you do a compositional analysis of what's going on, what's driving that activity.
That's right. And I think, good segue, so used to be gold, what is it putting its money into now? So there's a Ballarat base hospital redevelopment, hundreds of millions of dollars being poured in. Expected to complete, I think, by 2027, from what I read, adding a new emergency department, operating theatres, a core driver for the housing demand that we had no doubt going to see over the next few years. It's going to bring a lot of jobs in. So again, what I like is the concentration of the investments are going into the sectors which sort of
Yep.
are what I would consider evergreen. I don't know if that's an economist term, but like when you see so much money go into healthcare, that's usually a good sign. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
Education and healthcare? Yeah. Cool.
Yep. You can see that across Australia. That's happening more and more, investment. I've got to caveat that a little bit. So the Victorian story, the Ballarat story, and to a degree the Bendigo story as well, is when you have macro frameworks in an economy that suggest the domestic economy is slowing down a little bit, and that's a national story as well because of high interest rates. But when an economy starts slowing down, what you see is the government make up more of output. This is how governments work. So really, really simply is when an economy starts going down, the government goes up and that keeps the total amount higher. The government makes up, 25% of the total economy. So if they go up a few percentage points and the broader economy goes down a little bit, the broad growth story continues of a city. So when you look at hospital upgrades, road upgrades, reinvestment by government sector items, it can often mean that the domestic economy is a little bit weaker. Especially this type of investment, these type of optional ones like renewal of an airport, like ones that are like, let's expand a hospital out. It could be because the city's bursting at the seams from growth and it needs to happen. Or it could be, we've had this on our radar for a period of time. Let's do it now because we've got this wish list of items being like, when will we promote the economy? So this is going back into like economic theory land about how to manage market cycles, economic cycles. And property cycles are driven by this to a degree, especially when you go into regional sub-cities like this and smaller markets. And the reason why I talk about all of this is the Victorian economy has been made up more of government sector activity over recent years. The employment growth story, it is driven a lot by the government sectors. And when you look at the domestic economy, like the underlying non-government stuff, like a really, really simple one is how is the retail sector going? Just as a proxy for the broader economy. Are people spending money? The composition of jobs in Victoria and in cities like this is retail has had a fairly material drop off in the percentage of people employed in retail versus everywhere else. That suggests that the domestic economy is weak. And it's being made up by investments like this. This is something that I've tracked as we've just had conversations about Victoria, that's a broader story that's happening.
Okay. So how would you... With that framework in mind, how would you then classify someone like Ballarat? So it is growing. There is obviously a lot of activity happening there. There are people moving in. So I think the intention with Ballarat is, I have the numbers here. I think it's going up by 40% over the next, that's the population growth story.
Yeah,
right?
Brilliant.
It's the lowest of the three from what I could see, 42% for Bendigo, 63% for Geelong, 40%, right?
This is what I love about these locations. So when I talk about regional locations, and let's put Darwin into the mix here because it's a city of 150,000 people into the mix here. The broader, like when you just think of a location, these cities have increasing population rates, significant increasing population rates, have a very diverse economy that is driven by so many different sectors that no one sector, unless it falls off a cliff, and that won't happen because they're resilient. Like healthcare is resilient. People will always get sick. People will need healthcare services across the board. The university will always have people there because you can turn that tap on and off and it exists. It's there. The stable sectors, it's very, very diverse. And then you got the macro framework for like the broader interest rate story. And I just touched on that. I just touched on over the past few years, the domestic economy in Australia has had pullback. The sectors that have made up for it are the government sectors. But now the domestic economy is going to start going up and up and up again. So you have the economic change that's going to be driving more activity across Victoria, which is the most interest rate sensitive market as an economy. Not so much as a housing market because I have a little bit less debt, but as an economy, it definitely is. And then there's Sydney, which is very, very close. You can say the same thing, interchange between them. But Melbourne has a very diverse, interest-sensitive economy, so does Sydney. And that same story applies to Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong. That's why I do think it's got a lot going for it because of that just mix the compositional things that are happening and then mixed in with the fact that it has yield. Melbourne doesn't have yield. So because it has yield, it's got this story going for it. So this is Ballarat I'm talking about, but I'm also layering this with the conversations that we've had about Geelong and Bendigo.
Makes a ton of sense. Cool. I like it. So I think just leaning into some of the economic activity that has been happening there, GovHub, I think they brought in 1,000 government jobs, of all things, into the CBD.
Not surprised.
There you go. Makes sense. It stabilized the economy, it lifted the rental demand as well. So you will see a lot of the suburbs that were mentioned, like Wendouree, Soldiers Hill is another example, Mount Clear. They've actually had like quite steep drop-offs in like vacancy rates. I like the micro level data that tells us that there is a growing demand for rentals in these markets. There's not enough housing for people who are sort of a little bit transient, I guess. They're there for like 2-3 years on a government job or working at the hospital, and that has pushed the rents up quite a bit, and that sort of feeds into the whole 5% yield, 5.5% yield.
Yeah, for sure.
Right,
is it sustainable? Is that typically where it sits, or is it just one-off spikes?
No, I think it is definitely is sustainable. I think we could you get better yield 6 years ago before Bendigo sort of went through its run? Absolutely, of course, right?
Yeah.
It's all stabilized, but there are still 4.5-5% yield opportunities out there if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. It's the world we live in as well. Like,
it is.
It's different. Everything is contextual. Everything is
Correct.
relative. The whole Melbourne story, all of these markets is a relative to the rest of Australia story. And, previously, 4 or 5 years ago, you'd be like, why wouldn't I invest in Adelaide? It's got a 6.5% yield. Why am I talking about Bendigo? Why am I talking about Ballarat? I can go to a diverse economy that's very, very spread out, that's got a lot going for it, and add in obvious housing shortage issues, which may not have been that obvious 5 years ago, but obvious housing shortage capacity issues. I kind of would have assumed they would have solved it quicker, but you would invest in Adelaide. But now Adelaide's at a 3.6% yield, where it's just like, hey, I'm not investing in Adelaide. It's got a poorer yield than Melbourne, right? So the relativity is there were thousands, tens of thousands of people investing in Adelaide, or tens of thousands of people, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people buying in Brisbane, buying in Perth.
Yep.
The relativity, the lack of options is what's going to be driving more and more into these markets. And this is my reading of the wins suggests that all three of these markets, I'm going to rely on you for the expertise as to the order of which and the ones that will do the best soonest. But all three of these markets are set for momentum that we can't really see in the data just yet, because there's tens of thousands of investors, maybe hundreds of thousands of investors sitting there on their computers across the board being like, I don't have many options, much like the Darwin story. But the Darwin story has risk, because we are not talking about an area that's increased its population by 42% in 10 years. You're talking about an area that has no population growth in the past. So that is inherently, fundamentally, a little bit scarier than these markets. These are safe. These are safe bets with 5.5% yields on offer, and nowhere else is offering you that with diverse economies. I'm talking about Darwin. I'm talking about North Queensland.
Yeah.
We're talking about Perth. You're talking about a broader analysis. You just put them all laid in front of each other, being like pros, cons list. These three markets have a lot of pros in them and provide stability too. And with that shifting happening, I can just see so many people just appear. That makes sense. So that it's attractive.
It is.
I'd take a bet on it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, in case anyone asks. I don't think I'll be bothered, but I'd take a bet on it. Unless I could sort it out for me and do it all. I might just do it. But it's not the plan. As I'm speaking right now, it is interesting. Ballarat is part of that movement, even if the data isn't the best of them, and even if we're ranking it last of the three, I still think it's
higher than some of the other ones.
I still think it's really, really good.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. So,
makes a ton of sense, man. So that's us. That's Ballarat.
Yeah. Do you want to quickly reiterate the three suburbs that you said? And do you have any bad suburbs?
I do. I have a couple. So
let's just share that again.
So top picks for me personally: Soldiers Hill. I love it. Mount Clear, Wendouree. I'm a fan of. Right. Again, it's all relative, guys. So take it with a grain of salt. It's for the people chasing more affordable properties. That's kind of where these sort of pockets sit. You're looking at that 5% yield as well. Are there more premium areas? Sure, but I am on the side of, if I'm going to go into a regional market, I want a bit of a balance. I want the yield factor, coming into it, as well as the capital growth. The ones I would be a little bit cautious of, right? Again, from a relative sense, Alfredton, Lucas, Delacombe, a lot of land supply and just a lot of activity going on from a housing perspective. So I'm not
Is that
convinced.
construction? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, a lot of new estates sort of popping up. So I'm not convinced it's the right place to park your money. It's sort of like the equivalent would be the Armstrong Creeks of Geelong. I'm not sure if that's the right place right now because there is a lot of what I would say mediocre housing sort of popping up. You know, the comes up in, you know, what it takes 12 months to build it. It still costs $600,000, but there is a lot of supply coming in. So I would probably be cautious of these areas in terms of oversupply. But yeah, Mount Clear, Windori, Soldiers Hill, all good options.
Awesome. Adi, that is so amazing that you've shared those suburbs. I feel like we've done something really, like there's a lot of value here because we're telling you the broad macro frameworks as to why these areas are doing really well. And I'm putting my weight of thought behind it and saying, yeah, there's a story here. There's something here that makes a lot of sense. It's a little bit tea leafy at the moment, but so was Darwin, so was Melbourne, so was Mildura. Maybe that one not so much because I wasn't tea leaving it at all. I was learning it and how to spell it at the time.
That's true.
But it is a bit tea leafy, but it's got a lot of real positives to it. And I really think the lack of alternatives and the number of investors and the size of these cities and the timing of these rate cuts and the sectorial analysis of the economy and the spark that's here, that interest rate story that's driving this change, the combination of all of this with a yield component that's there and everyone wanting to buy in Melbourne but not being able to because of the yield, it's got so much going for it in like hey, things are going to change here. The investors might come and they can come in a wave here. So it's got the potential for it. And I really think you have added so much weight with the suburbs and the data analysis there across the board. We have done a good episode a few episodes ago where we talked about the 5 best markets. And in those markets, I looked at them and I was really convinced. I'm like, these are really good. Golden Square was one of them. Winduri that you've just touched on in Ballarat. Ararat, just wanted to say the word rat, was one of them. I'm not so sure about that one. I do think it'll do well because you've picked it up, but it is a small little location. These have the stability frameworks attached to it. So there's so much here for our audience. We wish you well. Take this away. Hopefully some of you take some action with it and can move forward with your investing plans as a result.